my name is Miss Jody and welcome to Kaukauna Public Library's Experiencing Art for Adults. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. Hopefully you got your packs. Your packs will include or should have included paint and a couple pieces of paper with the paintbrush included into the basic paint kit. What you will need today is you will need to make sure that you have at least one water. I like to do one clean and one dirty container, and then for sure maybe something that you can dab your brush off of and dry, whether it's paper towel, whether it's cloth, it doesn't matter, as long as you've got something that you can kind of dry your brush a little bit as we go. So hopefully within this introduction you may have gotten those items all set and prepared and ready to go. And I will say that I often like to tape my canvas down while I'm doing watercolor. It does kind of prevent the paper from stretching and warping a little bit. It'll still do it because it's wet going on paper, so it'll happen a little bit, but tape often helps. I'm not sure if you wanted to pause that and maybe get some tape. If it's not painter's tape, a trick is you can get any kind of tape it onto your clothing a couple different times, pull it off nice and neat, and then tape it down onto clothing, pull it off nice and neat, and then you can use it a little bit like painter's tape because it won't then rip the top layer of your paper off. You can pull it off nice and gently and still get a really great framed out look when you're done. So, all right, let's begin. All right, so I'd like you to take your brush and go ahead and get it nice and wet, and we are going to do what is called a wet on wet technique, which means that our paint is going to go onto an already wet canvas. So as we do that, our picture is a landscape, a winter landscape. We're going to just wet the top portion of the canvas. Our brushes are pretty small, and I am doing it with the brushes that you received so that I'm kind of knowing what you're experiencing right now. So just you don't want to soak the paper. You just want to take whatever you see that's shiny and move it all around. No puddles, no sitting there. And then be careful not to rub too hard, because sometimes if you do, you will get some of the paper coming off. So now that we have half the paper wetted down, we're going to go ahead and get the brush nice and wet and dip it in only yellow. And then get the brush wet a little bit more and dip it only in yellow. And maybe one more time and only in yellow. And soak your brush with yellow. Go directly to that wet canvas. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the yellow in the middle of where we had wet our canvas, not at the bottom of where we had wet our canvas. Then we'll work down. And what that's going to do is that's going to create the illusion that there's like a bright spot at the very center of your landscape, as if it's nice and white hot almost. So what you're going to do is dip back and forth in that yellow as needed. Make sure if your paint is running off of your paintbrush to dip back in there. Sometimes if your canvas is drying or your paper is drying quickly, you can actually just re-wet it with water and then reconstitute the already applied paint, and then just have it go not quite up to the top. All right, after you're done with that color, what we're going to do is we're going to move to blue, believe it or not. A nice dark blue. Get your paint loaded with blue, and you're going to start with the darkest part of the blue up at the top. Up at the top, so that's dark, but we're not going to remain that dark as we come all the way down into the yellow. What we're going to do is we're going to maybe get it wet a little bit more and drag some of that wet blue into the yellow. We're going to mix in with a little red here pretty soon for some purple, but as we do that, we just want that darker blue to be right up at the top. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of blue and I'm going to get my paintbrush wet, and I'm actually going to go into the red and start mixing, and that's going to give a purple. I just didn't want a straight purple. I just wanted a little bit of blue left on my brush. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to do some circular motions in the very wet part of the sky. So this is going to be our background. And so it's going to have the appearance of maybe like a dawn. So once you get one horizontal line of circular strokes, I know that was a mouthful, of red and blue, what you can do is reconstitute your brush with a little or your paint with a little bit of water, and you can go back up into the blue section and you can actually do some more faint, puffy cloud looks. Go back into water. Actually, your water doesn't have to be clean at this point because you've got all your colors mixed in here anyway. Circular motions are going to give the illusion that there's either mist in the background, clouds in the background, or just like a hazy dawn. And remember, go back into that water as often as you need, but just don't rub your canvas too much that you're actually pulling some of that paper away. If you find that your canvas is too wet, believe it or not, you can take a piece of your paper towel and you can actually pull paint and water up. And especially with a wet-on-wet application, it does nothing but good things because it almost makes it look a little bit more transparent, like clouds. So you can kind of really, you can't go wrong with the background. And then if I feel like there's a little too sharp of lines that have appeared, I go ahead and wet my brush again, reconstitute what's already existing on the page, and then I just soften it up a little bit. That's the beauty of the wet on wet. All right, so here we go. We're going to go ahead and let this section dry because we're going to apply wet onto this dry section after we get done with the bottom. Since this is a winter scene, we are going to draw a landscape of rolling snow-covered hills. So as we do that, what we're going to do is I think I'm going to choose dark purple for my outline with a little bit of blue tint. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start pretty high up so I have a lot of snow-covered hills. Let's get a lot on this brush. Go back and get a lot of purple and a little bit of blue. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a horizon line. That horizon line is going to be, since it's going to be a rolling hill, we're going to bring it to a point in the center. But we'll do it like this, where it overlaps. There we go. So that's my illusion of a rolling hill. So that part, just so you know, is much more wet than I would like. So I am going to take and I'm going to pull some of that away, and then I'll address that later, which is really kind of great for you guys to see because watercolor is really forgiving. So what we'll do is we'll take the same amount of thickness of that blue and purple, and what we're going to do is we're going to just draw lines in the snow. Anywhere you'd like, just to kind of create the illusion that there's rolling hills of snow. Okay, we're going to let that go and dry for a little bit. There, I think I'm going to be done or I'll get a little bit carried away. I'm going to let this go so that these are dry, and then later we'll come back and we'll reapply just clear water over this to make it look as if they were snow covered. So next what we're going to do is we're going to do the tree lines. This is not quite dry. I am going to lift it up and I'm just going to wave it around just like this and blow. It does blow, or it does dry rather quickly, but I just wanted a few more seconds. Go ahead and blow your canvas, wave it around, and then what we're going to do is make sure that to the touch it is not leaving wet marks on our finger. And if it is, you're going to blow a little bit more or wave it around. I'm blowing mine just a little bit more. All right, so now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and test it on one side, which I think this side is going to be my drier side. You'll have to feel out what your drier side is. And then, believe it or not, we're going to go into yellow with a little bit of brown. And what we're going to do is make the very first layer of our trees. And they are going to be they're going to be layered in colors. So I'm going to do the lightest color first, believe it or not. And so what we'll do is we'll do squiggly lines for trees, as far up as you would like to go, but very, very thick paint on your brush. You actually do not need a lot of water on this, much more paint than water. A little bit more. And I'm going to create my tree line just by squiggling all the way up. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to squiggle the tree lines up highest on the sides, and then they will come down at an angle towards the center of the horizon line. So squiggling back and forth with a very thick paint of yellow, and then shortening our trees as we go down the horizon line at an angle. So I have like, I don't know, like 4 trees here, I think. And they're kind of like a rusty yellow. Dip your brush in water if you need to make sure that your paint is going on well and not dragging. And I might do one more very small one. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side, exactly the same thing. We're just gonna, the first layer is going to be yellow, squiggly lines of trees. And again, coming down at an angle, making those trees shorter as you approach the horizon line towards the middle of the piece. The first layer of yellow is just a background color to give the illusion that light is being caught within the branches of these trees. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to have the painting have a silhouette effect. And so we're going to get darker and darker. This too, we're going to have to make sure we dry before we apply our next layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the landscape with the rolling snow hills, and we are going to wet our brush just with clean water. As we do that, we're just going to make sure we look at our brush, make sure it is nice and clean. And what we'll do is we'll actually go around some of these lines first with wet, and then over them, and then you'll see it'll bleed into what's already wet, and then we'll get the effect that we want. There we go. So that the lines, the sharp lines start disappearing, and the blue is just a faint blue. It's not left pure white like snow, but it's not really dark blue either. So again, around each line with clear water, around each line, and then over each line. And it likes to blend into the already applied water as you go over it. Then you can kind of swirl around even the already existing landscape lines of the hills in the middle ground. All right, as we approach the foreground, we're going to do the same thing. Wet all the way around these lines with clear water so that it wants to accept it when you go over the lines and bleed into each other. Nice and fuzzy looking. All right, great. Very blended look. All right, couple more lines as the top is drying. I'm gonna give a couple blows, breaths of blows here across the top and see if it'll be ready for our next application. Around each line with clear and then blend. All right, so just remember to finish up every area of your rolling hills here. Okay, put the clear water down first around any of the lines that you put down, and then take clear water and brush over, letting it bleed and blend really nicely into the snowy hill. So, and once you have done that, if you think that you want more color, I will show you. I have, as you guys keep going, you can just keep painting there. I will show you here. I have 2 very different pieces that I've done, and one has a lot less color on it and one has more color on it. So don't be discouraged if yours looks different than the one I'm currently doing, because both look very good in their own right. they will still come off with a sense that they're covered in snow. Even if it's full of blue or full of purple, it doesn't matter. You guys have got at least 4 sheets to work with, so this can be your practice run, and then you can completely try it again with the other sheets that were provided and come up with completely different results, which is kind of the beauty of coloring with watercolor. It's never the same, which is, I just think that's what's so fun about it. So again, just finish up on your snowy hillside as much as you would like to put down. Again, is fine with you. If you find that there are any sharp or drastic lines in there, go ahead and reconstitute it with some water, and it should blend very nicely. All right, so hopefully we're gonna get to the point where the middle ground has dried, that first layer of yellow. But before we do that, I myself, if you're still working on yours, I myself am gonna crisp up my, my horizon line, which was pretty much straight blue. Maybe a little purple, I think, but I'm gonna crisp it up with a very thick application of blue and not a lot of water. If you need to, in fact, let's practice that. How we do that is rinsing our brush, completely drying it, making sure that if the blue is wet in our palette, dip in a little bit of purple because I'm blending. I love to blend. You guys should really just feel free to blend any colors you want, really. And then hardly any water. And that's gonna get you that more crisper color on the brush that you can lay down. And so I just went over that really fuzzy part, which is not gonna exactly matter in the end, but I like to know that it's there because in the end, we're gonna actually have pretty dark trees, but that's okay. I like to have the washed look disappear because right here it kind of looked a little bit washed to me. So I wanted to crisp that line up a little bit with thicker paint. All right, so as we move forward, what we're gonna do is rinse our brush, dry it off on your paper towel or your cloth or whatever you've got. And then we're gonna layer over the yellow. How we do that is we're actually gonna go like a browny orange. So to mix brown and orange is totally up to you how you wanna do it, but you can always use this, the other side of your paint palette, put a little bit of water, and it can actually be dirty water if you don't have clean because you're blending. Put a little bit of water there. Now take your water-filled brush and go into the orange, dip it back into the water, and your brown. And then what you can do is you can go onto your palette and you've got the start of a color. But now it is not thick enough. I know that I need a lot more color, so I'm gonna dip it back into my brown. And then I'm gonna start blending more of it onto my palette. Just there, see how it's thick? It's not dripping off my brush, but it's when I stroke it, it doesn't have a clear streak. It's very thick. That's what I want, okay? So when you're blending anything, you can blend right on the lid of the palette, and it's nice because then you can get the color you want. All right, and that's really great because you'll be able to practice that with all the rest of your, all the rest of the pieces of paper that I sent with you. Okay, so same thing. We're gonna go right over the yellow that we laid down with some brown. And I don't cover the yellow completely because remember, this is gonna be the effect that there's some, like maybe some sunlight kind of dappled in through this rising sun, maybe setting sun. I don't know, sometimes it just depends, right? And nice and thick. If it's not thick enough, go back and put your brush into the brown. And I had a little bit of orange in there, whatever you've got. So again, going over the existing yellow tree line and going down at an angle towards the center of the horizon. All right, and do the exact same thing on the other side. Do your squiggly lines for your trees. And remember to go all the way down towards the center of your horizon line, shortening the length of those trees. If you guys want to practice stippling, it is definitely done with a loaded brush. It has to be loaded with a lot. I'll demonstrate stippling. Stippling is touching the paintbrush tip to the canvas like dots. And that's a technique that not everybody likes because it takes a little bit more control, but it definitely gives you the illusion that that is a tree. And it's not so impressionistic. It is, but it's just a little bit more detailed. It's kind of fun. Takes a little bit more patience, but that's another technique. Once you have your brown laid down, it is good to make sure to note which side is drying faster before we move on to our next layer. I'm going to move on to my next layer on this side of my paper because it is almost completely dry already. And by the time I'm done with my next layer, this side will be dry. So go ahead and take a quick look at your piece. Make sure there's no sheen from some of the wet brown or orange that you laid down, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to proceed with the next color. The next color is going to be blue with some, let's see, I'm going to actually, it can be pretty much anything, but I think I'm going to put some blue with the already existing brown that's on the side of my, oh, I did purple on accident, on the side of my palette here. A little more blue. I might even put a little green in it. You can really kind of get funky here because it just needs to be darker. That's all. But you all need to know that in the end, we're going to layer a layer of pretty much black over whatever you're choosing, whether it's dark green, dark blue, whatever you're doing, we're going to probably put black over just for an extra layer. I might even grab a little black in this blue. And I'm again going to start on top of the dried side first, which my side is this side, the dried brown. And I'm going to start on the top. I'll go ahead and demonstrate more of the stippling as we finish up the rest of this piece, because I think it will actually kind of just pull out the yellow really well. Okay, so if you can see, I have stippled my first tree on the left side. I am going to go all the way off the tape at the bottom of the tree. I'm going to continue on down each tree. Towards the center of the horizon line. Okay, so as this side is drying, it's almost there. I actually feel like I need to see what I can do to pull off some of the more wet areas. And it's not gonna matter because they're trees. So I am gonna pull off all of the wet with a little bit of paper towel, and I am going to dab. It really won't matter because, again, they're trees. All right, so I'm gonna go over the other side with the dark blue, and I will go ahead and demonstrate the rest with stippling. Stippling, again, is the technique where you're pulling the paint or applying the paint with dabbing motion perpendicular to the paper. The brush is perpendicular to the paper. You can continue to scribble the line or squiggle the line, it's not gonna matter. But remember, make it thick all the way off to the paint or to the side of the tape. You can go over the tape is what I'm trying to say. So then it'll be a nice clean line. All right, finish up all the other trees. Nice and abstract or kind of free flowing. You really don't have to be too particular. Got a couple trees left, And by the time we get over to this left side, hopefully we'll be able to apply the black because that will have been dried. All right, so we have a number of different colors shown in here. I know it probably went against what you thought we were gonna do, but it really does give the illusion that the sun is coming up from the background. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean my brush completely off and get it a little bit wet, but I want to go into the black, and mostly black. If there's another color in there from a different color, it won't matter if you're really getting a thick loaded brush of black. All right, pull off dripping paint. Just make sure if you thrust your paintbrush down, there's not a lot of dripping. That's kind of important because you don't want it to have a wet on wet look as we stipple the very last portion of what is going to look like a silhouette. So I will do some stippling of black all the way up the side of this painting on the 4 trees that I have here in the middle ground. I'll just go over really quick. The background is the sky. The middle ground are the trees. The horizon line is where the trees are set on, and then the foreground is where the snowy hills kind of look like they're kind of creeping up to your front door, I guess is how we could say it. Okay, so then dip your brush as many times in that black as you need so it's nice and loaded. And I think I'm pretty dry on the other side, so I'm gonna start going on the other side with the black. And again, this is creating more of a silhouetted look. To the tree line. And we are just about done. The only other thing that we can do to make it look a little bit more realistic is that since the light source is not coming from this direction, it's actually coming from the background, we can take, believe it or not, our dirtiest water, and we're just going to go over the edges of some of the other painted areas of this canvas. And it's dirty water, so it's gonna give the illusion that it is creeping out of the shadows of the night. So dirty water is kind of a good way to give like a wash effect. And if you wanna make your water dirtier, you absolutely can, but you definitely don't wanna lay a thick layer of color down on the snow. So if you get kind of the picture of what's going on here, I don't know if it's kind of showing up on your screen, but I'm gonna blend just enough dirty water where it looks like we're coming out of the dark of night. Okay, so after your dirty water wash over your snow, you guys are finished with the wintry landscape for beginner watercolors. Thanks for joining me. I always have fun, and we'll see you next time.